I love the thought that whatever we're creating for out there could also benefit us grandly here on planet Earth. So I want to introduce you now to a 13-year-old. I was privileged to have him join my online classes during the pandemic. But Brian Bartelo is a 13-year-old homeschooled student who takes classes through Astronova School and Genesee Community College. Yes, you heard that right, community college. Even when I met him back in 2020, he was already taking calculus at the college level. His area of study is astrophysics and business law. He's a member of AIAA, AIA, and Phi Theta Kappa. He's very interested in mitigating the space debris issue in low Earth orbit, but he also last year was very esteemed to win the Space Kids Global Essay Contest in 2022 and got to fly aboard Zero G. And then this summer will be an intern at University of Buffalo, invited by Dr. John Chrysides, working on satellites for Homeland Security. So this bears me to ask you, what were you guys doing at age 13? Please make welcome future space technologist and engineer Brian Bartelo.
Hello, can you hear me? All right, so hello everyone. Today I'm going to be talking about space sustainability and space environmentalism and how we can mitigate the impact on space debris. So space debris is a problem to our path to Mars, which is why we're all here. So I want you to think about just how our lives are impacted by data from satellites and other space assets, such as the ISS. And think about how fragile all of these assets in space are when a piece of metal that's going countless times the speed of a bullet, easily hypersonic, crashes into it and could shatter everything. So we need to have an environmental plan for space. And deorbiting strategies have to be included in launch projects for this to be effective. And however, space agencies can reward sustainability and ingenuity by rewarding companies that create systems to mitigate space debris impact. So what does a broken, abandoned bicycle have to do with space environmentalism? So imagine you're riding your bicycle, but it breaks. Most of you would you just go back later to retrieve it, or would you just leave it indefinitely where it broke? I think most of us would retrieve it, but the problem is some people can't. Sometimes they're too busy, or it's just impossible for any reason. Space litter is an issue, just like litter on Earth is a problem. But the thing is, space litter is harder to clean up because you have to catch it while it's in space, and even then you still have to bring it back. And debris clogging orbital highways can make launches and traveling more difficult, as objects will break apart and they might even create a wall which nothing can pass through. This issue is called the Kessler syndrome, and as you could guess, it was theorized by Dr. Kessler. And I talked to him on the phone one day, and he said that this is still an urgent issue for humanity, and that he believes that people are not taking this issue seriously enough. And that's another thing I'm going to be talking today. And he also explains that the longer this spreads unchecked, the harder it becomes to mitigate, somewhat like climate change on Earth. And this issue could lead to humanity having thousands of years without anything in space, due to just fields of debris which nothing can survive, unless you're going to pay for very expensive shields, which is just impractical. So it's hard to give a concrete number on how much space debris there is, because what do you quantify? What is really space debris or what is just pretty much fine dust. And it's kind of like measuring leaves in a windstorm. You can only notice some of them, and sometimes the shapes kind of figure together, and it's hard to see, and it's hard to count. And that means that it's hard to track too, especially when you're not able to communicate with the satellite because it may be broken. And Dr. Mariba Jah, who I'm hoping to speak to soon in my Astronova class on space debris, has developed something called Astrograph. And what this does is it's trying to help the problem with tracking the space debris that's all around us, because it's hard. But this website, you can look for specific objects. Yeah, you can. There in the top left, you can see that there are search bars, which you can look for specific satellites, and you can click on each satellite for more data. And I talked to some astronauts about this. So Dr. Sion Proctor, I first talked to, said how basically this is kind of something that we need to chase after, something philosophical almost, that humans deserve to have free space. We deserve to be able to explore, and we don't want to be limited by debris because we belong in the stars. And I also talked to Chris Zambrowski, who was also on Inspiration 4 with Proctor and others, and he mentioned how they had to have shields because there was space debris and micrometeorites. And the shields did protect them, but they were at an elevated risk because they were at a higher altitude where they weren't really able to clean it up at all or anything, and it wasn't burning up, so the debris would just sit there. And this also has a lot of effects on space tourism, because I talked to some space tourists, Mark and Sharon Hagel, who went up on Jeff Bezos' New Shepard rocket from Blue Origin, and I talked to them, and they said that it was amazing to actually see the Earth from space, not just from the images, but actually to go up there and just see the fragility and beauty of Earth. And there are a lot of pathways which can prevent incidents which could cause lawsuits and many other problems for companies that have space debris problems while trying to take up tourists. But it's eventually going to be expensive to do that, and an easier solution is to just get rid of the debris before it's too much of a problem. So I started my research on this whole space debris problem after I was taught about it by Dr. Trudy Hugenboom in one of my classes at Astronova. I spoke with Dr. John Crusidis at UB, who gave me insight as to the scope of the problem. And he also said that this is a problem which is far away from being solved, and that we need to keep working on how we can track the debris and how we can mitigate the damage before we actually start trying to get rid of the debris. And I also spoke with Artemis, who said about how businesses and companies need to be working together, but it can't just be one or the other, because they each have their own unique advantages in combating this problem. And there are many guidelines in place and laws. For example, I talked to a lot of people like Michel van Pelt, head of STEC cost engineering at ESA. He feels that the issue has to be addressed, but governments don't have the ability to be the driving factor, because it needs to be beneficial to actually try to clean up. There has to be reward, otherwise why bother? And corporate buy-in is one of the best ways to solve this. And there are already a lot of ways that this is happening, such as contracts being awarded by major space agencies. But chiefly, nobody wants any space debris hitting their house. We need to protect humans on the ground as well from space debris, because some materials don't burn up. And there are a lot of ways that this debris can be cleaned up. I'm not going to go through them all, but there are a lot. I also talked to founder of Obruta Space Solutions. It is based out of Canada, and they're researching tethered net removal technology, and they're also making an autonomous piloting software to dodge debris, do on-orbit servicing, and even clean up eventually. And they make the parts for other satellites and the AI. So now I'm going to talk a little bit about the Space Force. The Space Force is currently tracking and cataloging all of the debris in space that's larger than a millimeter. But the problem is it's not easy to give a satellite a speeding ticket. So the U.S. Space Force shoulders the burden by tracking working satellites and cataloging debris to alert people when they need to move their space the property they own in space, such as satellites and the ISS, away. But is this what a military should be doing? I don't think that a military should be doing the job of a traffic cop. And is it possible for a commercial entity to do this? And are there dangers involved with this? And I talked to the technical director for launch and range operations at Space Force, Space Systems Command, and Mark Bontrager. He said that one of their priorities is to monitor everything around us and make sure that there's also no reentry risk. There's also, as I mentioned earlier, there are a lot of efforts to stop this, but the problems lie within that there are a few people who can't get rid of their satellites, mostly because they're old, because new satellites are now, from most countries, are required to have systems which help them deorbit, but mostly older satellites are not. And that causes an issue because they just sit there and eventually they crash and then they create lots of fine dust, which at the speed they're going at is very difficult. So we need to develop strategies to mitigate the issue and take this Kessler syndrome seriously. That is, if we want to actually ever go to Mars someday. And we need to have an environmental plan for space that we can explore Mars and create safe passageways and new extraterrestrial communities. And thank you for listening. If you wish to contact me, my emails are on the screen. And special thanks to my Astronova planetary science teacher, Trudy Hugenboom, my CubeSat teachers, Kevin Simmons and Shauna Christensen, the Astronova critical analysis teacher, Josh Don, my space law mentor, Sean Case, my orbital mechanics mentor, Khushbu Patel, my Buffalo Squadron of Civil Air Patrol, and most of all, my space education teachers throughout COVID, Janet Ivey and Artemis Westenberg, who's not here. And Janet has literally been inspired me since I was a child, Janet's Planet, and I want to thank her so much for extending her kindness to allow me to speak about this important space environment issue today. Thank you.